Once upon a time. Here is the first part of your story based on the outline. The arrival of teacher Corey. The village of Ojan sat nestled between rolling green hills, where the river Ouse flowed like a silver ribbon through the land. It was a place where people honored traditions passed down through generations. They believed in hard work, respect for elders, and the wisdom of their ancestors. But there was one thing the village had not embraced: education for girls. In Ojan, girls were raised to be good wives and mothers. They learned how to cook, fetch water, and care for their families. Only the boys were sent to school, for they were seen as the future leaders and providers. But times were changing, and whispers of new ideas had reached the ears of Baba Ogunlai, the village chief. One evening, under the great baobab tree, the elders of Ojan gathered. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood, and the voices of the villagers hummed like a distant drumbeat. "Our daughters deserve knowledge," Baba Ogunlai declared, his deep voice commanding attention. "A girl who learns can shape her own future. She will not be a burden but a blessing." The elders murmured among themselves. Some nodded in agreement, while others frowned. Oba Kanal, the wealthiest trader in Ojan, leaned forward, his sharp eyes narrowing. "Chief Ogunlai," he said smoothly, "our ways have served us well for generations. Why should we change now? What good will come from filling girls' heads with big ideas?" Baba Ogunlai did not flinch. "Because the world is changing, Colonel. Our daughters should not be left behind." After much debate, the elders agreed. A teacher would be brought from the city to educate the village girls. And so, the news spread: Ojan would welcome its first teacher for girls. A stranger in the village. A week later, the villagers gathered near the dusty road leading into Ojan. Mothers with babies on their backs, fathers with arms crossed, and children barefoot with curious eyes all waited in anticipation. Then, through the shimmering heat of the afternoon sun, he appeared. Teacher Corey. He was young, far younger than the elders had expected. Dressed in a neatly pressed shirt and simple trousers, he carried only a small bag slung over his shoulder. His steps were confident, his gaze bright with purpose. A hush fell over the crowd as Baba Ogunlai stepped forward. "Welcome, Teacher Corey," he said, his voice carrying across the open space. Corey bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Baba Ogunlai. It is an honor to serve this village." The villagers studied him closely. Some were impressed by his humble demeanor, while others whispered doubts. "He looks like a boy himself," an old woman muttered. "What can he teach our daughters?" But Baba Ogunlai had faith in the young man. He led Corey through the village, showing him the schoolhouse, a small hut with wooden benches and a thatched roof. "This is where your lessons will begin," he said. Corey smiled. "It is perfect." That evening, a feast was held in Corey's honor. The women prepared steaming bowls of jollof rice, pounded yam, and pepper soup, while the drummers played lively rhythms that echoed through the night. But not everyone celebrated. Oba Kanal sat in silence, watching Corey carefully. A teacher with a purpose. The next morning, Corey wasted no time. Under the great mango tree, he gathered the girls of Ojan, young, wide-eyed, and eager. Some had never held a book before. Others had never written their own names. He smiled at them. "You are here because you deserve to learn. Knowledge is power, and power gives you choices. And I will teach you how to make the right choices." The girls listened in awe. He began with simple lessons: how to read and write, how to count, and how to think for themselves. But Corey knew that education was more than books. He wanted them to understand their worth. One day, he held up a bright red bead and asked, "What is this worth?" The girls shrugged. Then he held up a shiny gold coin. "And this?" Their eyes widened. "The coin is valuable," one girl said. Corey nodded. And so are you. He let his words settle. You are worth more than gold. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. The girls whispered among themselves, excitement lighting their faces. For the first time, someone was telling them that they mattered. Watching from a distance, some mothers wiped away silent tears. Maybe, just maybe, their daughters would have a different future. But in the shadows of the market, Oba Connor clenched his jaw. This teacher is dangerous, he thought. If the girls learn too much, they will challenge our ways. I must stop him. And so, even as Kore's lessons flourished, a hidden battle had begun. A teacher unlike any other. The sun rose gently over the village of Ojon, its golden rays painting the earth in warm hues. The air smelled of morning dew and fresh bread, but something new had awakened in the village, a hunger for knowledge. Each morning, under the great baobab tree, Teacher Kore gathered his students. The shade of the mighty tree provided the perfect classroom. The girls sat on woven mats, their eyes bright with curiosity. Kore did not just teach them to read and write. He told stories, powerful, unforgettable tales. A woman is like a river, he said one morning, his voice smooth like flowing water. If guided well, she nourishes the land. If blocked, she finds another way. Nothing can stop her. The girls whispered excitedly. No one had ever spoken of women in such a way before. Lessons that changed the village. As days turned into weeks, Kore introduced lessons that had never been taught in Ojon before. He spoke of dreams and choices, that every girl had the right to decide her future. He taught them about their bodies, explaining health and hygiene, things that had been hidden from them. One afternoon, he held up a small, folded piece of cloth. This, he said, is not just cloth. It is dignity. It is self-care. It is something every girl must understand. The girls nodded eagerly, absorbing every word. For the first time, they learned about their rights, the right to say no, the right to education, the right to choose their own path. Some parents were amazed. Their daughters no longer walked with their heads down. They spoke with confidence. They dreamed out loud. Whispers in the shadows. But not everyone was pleased. In the corners of the market, near the well, in the elders' council, whispers began to spread. What is this teacher doing? One elder muttered. These girls should be learning to cook, not speaking like men. Another elder scoffed. It is unnatural. This is not our way. The loudest voice of discontent came from Oba Connor, the wealthy trader. His business depended on the old traditions, where girls were married young, and their families paid him for goods to prepare for their weddings. An educated girl was a dangerous thing. She would question. She would refuse. And that meant Connor would lose power. This teacher is poisoning our traditions, he growled to his men. If he is not stopped, our way of life will crumble. But Oba Connor was no fool. He knew that openly opposing Kore would turn the village against him. So instead, he plotted a test that would prove whether Kore truly practiced what he preached. The trap is set. One evening, as the moon rose high, Connor called his most trusted servant, Lekon. Find me the most beautiful young woman in the village, he ordered. Someone who can tempt the teacher. Lekon nodded and returned with Tenny, a girl known for her striking beauty. You will go to Teacher Kore, Connor instructed her. Tell him you admire him. Tell him you wish to learn, privately. Tenny's eyes widened. But Teacher Kore is a good man, she protested. Connor laughed coldly. We shall see how good he truly is. Tenny hesitated, but she knew refusing Oba Connor's request was dangerous. With a deep breath, she nodded. The trap was set. A teacher's true test. The next evening, just as Kore was closing his lesson, Tenny approached him, her voice soft. Teacher Corey, may I speak with you in private? Corey looked up, surprised. The other girls had already left. Of course, he said kindly. Tenny stepped closer, lowering her gaze shyly. I admire you, she whispered. I wish to learn, in a way no one else has. Corey frowned slightly. Every lesson I teach is for all. You need not seek me alone. Tenny's heart pounded. Connor had told her to press further. She reached out, her fingers grazing his arm. But I want to learn from you, as a woman learns from a man. A heavy silence fell between them. The air around them felt thick. For a long moment, Corey did not speak. Then, slowly, he stepped back. Tenny, he said gently but firmly. You are a student. Your future is bigger than this moment. Do not let anyone make you believe otherwise. Tenny felt tears prick her eyes. She had expected him to fall for the trap, but instead, he saw through it. He had not shamed her. He had saved her. She bowed her head. Forgive me, Teacher Corey. He smiled. Go home, Tenny. Your worth is far greater than what you have been told. As she walked away, guilt twisted inside her. She had failed Connor, but more importantly, she had failed herself. The plan backfires. The next morning, Tenny went to Connor and told him everything. Teacher Corey is not like the men you know, she said, her voice steady. He is true to his words. Connor's expression darkened. You are a foolish girl, he spat. You have embarrassed me. But the damage was done. The village soon learned of the test, and how Corey had proven himself worthy of their trust. Even those who had doubted him now believed in him more than ever. Connor's plan had failed. But he was not done yet. If he could not break Corey's morals, he would break his reputation. And so, he plotted again, this time, to destroy Corey completely. The test of Corey's character. The festival of the new moon was the grandest event in the village of Ojan. Drums beat like thunder, women dressed in colorful wrappers, and children ran through the marketplace, their laughter ringing through the air. It was a time of joy, of feasting, of celebration. But this year, the festival carried a hidden purpose, the test. At the center of it all was Teacher Corey. Connor, still bitter from his failed scheme, had devised a new plan. If Corey cannot be tempted by one, he thought, then let's see if he can resist many. And so, with whispers and gold, he convinced the wealthiest families of the village to send their daughters, not for learning, but for seduction. Corey, unaware of the trap, accepted the festival invitation with a heart full of excitement and innocence. The dance of deception. As the festival began, the village square was alive with music and dancing. Men and women moved in perfect rhythm, their feet stamping against the earth in celebration. Corey stood near the great baobab tree, watching the joy unfold. Then, one by one, the daughters of the wealthiest families approached him. First came Ebony, the daughter of a great young merchant. Her beauty was the pride of Ojan, and she knew it. She smiled, stepping closer. Teacher Corey, I have never met a man as wise as you. I would love to learn from you, in private. Corey chuckled softly. Ebony, wisdom is for all, not just for those who seek it alone. She hesitated, taken aback by his response. She had expected him to falter, to be flattered. Instead, Corey's eyes held only kindness, not desire. She stepped away, defeated. Then came Ifelalu, the daughter of a rich cattle herder. She placed a delicate hand on Corey's arm. Teacher Corey, a man like you should not live alone. You need a wife, a woman of beauty and grace. Corey gently removed her hand. A wife should not be chosen for beauty alone, Ifelalu. True companionship is built on more than what the eyes can see. She blushed, realizing he would not be moved. She, too, stepped away. One after another, the daughters of the wealthy came forward, their words sweet as honey, their smiles laced with hidden intentions. Some praised him, some offered wealth, some even whispered of love. But Corey remained unshaken. He spoke with them as a teacher, not as a man seeking affection. The villagers, watching from a distance, murmured among themselves. See how he respects them. He does not take advantage of his position. This man is different. Even the elders who had once doubted Corey now saw the truth. His character was unbreakable. But standing in the shadows, Oba Connor seethed with rage. Corey had passed the test, but Connor was not done yet. If Corey could not be tempted, then he would be framed. And so, with a wicked glint in his eye, he devised the final, cruel trick. The web of lies. That night, as the festival reached its peak, Corey sat near the fire, speaking with Boba Ogunlai. The chief smiled warmly. You have proven yourself today, Corey. Even those who doubted you now respect you. Corey bowed humbly. I only do what is right, Boba. But just as they spoke, a commotion broke out in the crowd. A woman, wrapped in a torn wrapper, stumbled into the square, sobbing. Gasps filled the air as the villagers turned to see her. It was Tenny. The same Tenny whom Oba Connor had once sent to test Corey. Tears streamed down her face as she pointed a shaking finger at Corey. He took me, she cried. He promised me a lesson, but he used me instead. A wave of shock and horror swept through the crowd. The villagers turned to Corey, their eyes wide with accusation. Even Boba Ogunlai hesitated. Is this true, Corey? Corey's heart pounded. He stared at Tenny, seeing the fear and shame in her eyes, but also something else. Guilt. This was a lie. But it was a lie that the village was ready to believe. Oba Connor, standing at the edge of the crowd, smirked. His trap had been set, and this time, Corey might not escape it, the wicked scheme. The night was heavy with tension. The fire in the village square crackled, casting long shadows over the crowd. Tenny stood trembling, her eyes darting between the villagers and teacher Corey, who remained frozen in place. The whispers began. Could it be true? After all, no man is perfect. How do we know he is not hiding something? Corey's heart pounded in his chest. How could they believe this? Boba Ogunlai, the village chief, raised his hand to silence the crowd. His gaze settled on Tenny. Child, he said, his voice slow and measured, tell us everything. What happened? Tenny wiped her tears, her shoulders shaking. Teacher Corey called me one evening, she whispered. He told me he wanted to teach me in private, but then She broke down, unable to finish. Gasps spread through the crowd like wildfire. Mama Neka, one of the most powerful women in the village, stepped forward. Her eyes burned with fury. I knew it, she spat. This man came with sweet words, but he is no better than a snake in the grass. Corey's breath caught in his throat. No, he said firmly. This is a lie. His words were drowned out by the rising murmurs of the villagers. But not everyone was convinced. Some of the girls he had taught looked on in confusion. Teacher Corey never treated us badly. He never called us in private. Something is not right here. Yet the fear, the shame of Tenny's accusation was more powerful than reason. And behind the crowd, hidden in the shadows, Oba Connor smiled. Rumors like wildfire. The next day, whispers of Corey's supposed crimes spread beyond the village square. At the marketplace, women gossiped over baskets of yams and dried fish. Did you hear? The teacher fooled us all. He took advantage of the girls. And we welcomed him like a hero. At the riverbank, young men gathered, their voices tight with anger. He thinks he can do as he pleases because he is from the city. He will answer for this. And in the courtyards, mothers clutched their daughters close, warning them to stay away from the schoolhouse. Lekon, the village troublemaker, and his gang laughed as they spread the lies even further. I saw him sneaking into the girls' compound at night. He made them swear not to tell anyone. And Tenny was just the first to speak out. The rumors twisted and grew like a snake in the grass, turning Corey from a respected teacher into a villain overnight. And at the heart of it all was Oba Connor, pulling the strings. The elders' judgment. On the third day, Mama Neka had had enough. She stormed into the elders' council, her voice sharp and unyielding. We must act, she declared. This man cannot be left unpunished. The elders, some skeptical, some already swayed by the rumors, nodded gravely. But there is no proof, Baba Ogonlai pointed out. Mama Neka's eyes flashed. Then we will find proof. Put him on trial. Let him prove his innocence before all. The council murmured in agreement. It was the only way to settle the matter. And so, the decision was made. Teacher Corey would stand trial at the next full moon. A teacher's heartbreak. When Corey heard of the elders' decision, his heart shattered. He had come to this village to help, to change lives. Now, the very people he had sacrificed for wanted to see him fall. He sat alone in the schoolhouse, staring at the wooden desk where he had once taught the eager young girls of Ojan. Now, they would not even look him in the eye. Footsteps approached. Corey looked up to see Sua, one of his brightest students, standing in the doorway. Teacher Corey, she said softly, I don't believe what they say. Tears burned at the back of Corey's eyes. Thank you, Sua, he whispered. She hesitated. What will you do? Corey exhaled slowly. I will face them, he said. The truth will stand on its own. But even as he said it, doubt crept into his heart. Would the truth be enough? Or had the lies already won? The gathering storm. The night of the full moon arrived. The village square was packed, torches burning bright, casting flickering shadows over the expectant faces of the villagers. At the center of it all stood Teacher Koi, bound at the wrist, facing the elders. Before him sat Baba Ogonlai, Mama Neka, and the other council members, their faces solemn. Tenny stood before them, ready to repeat her accusation. And hidden in the crowd, Oba Connor watched with satisfaction. His plan had worked. Corey had no proof of his innocence. And when the night ended, he would no longer be the teacher of Ojan. He would be a man disgraced. Unless someone spoke the truth. The trial under the moonlight. The full moon hung high above Ojan, casting a pale glow over the gathered crowd. The villagers stood in tense silence, their faces illuminated by flickering torchlight. At the center of the village square, beneath the sacred moon tree, Teacher Corey stood with his hands bound. His face was calm, but his heart pounded. This was the moment of judgment. Baba Ogonlai sat at the front, flanked by the village elders. His gaze was unreadable as he lifted his staff and struck the ground. Let the truth be spoken tonight, the chief declared. Teacher Koi stands accused of dishonoring our daughters. If he is guilty, let the wronged ones step forward and speak. The crowd shifted, murmuring. All eyes turned toward the group of village girls, his students, his defenders, or his accusers. For a long moment, no one moved. A hush fell over the square. And then, silence. The girls stood still, eyes darting around nervously, but not a single one spoke. The tension grew heavy. The villagers looked at one another, waiting for someone, anyone, to confirm the rumors. But none did. Because none could. Because Koi had done nothing wrong. Doubt creeps in. Mama Neka, Her arms folded tightly, frowned deeply. "This proves nothing," she snapped. "Perhaps they are too afraid to speak." She turned to Corey, her eyes blazing. "If you are innocent, prove it." "Why should we believe your word over hers?" she demanded, pointing at Tenny, the girl who had accused him. Corey inhaled deeply. He had known this moment would come. "I do not ask you to believe me," he said calmly, his voice steady. "I ask only for truth. If I have wronged any of these girls, let them speak. I will not silence them." He looked directly at Tenny, his gaze unwavering. "Tenny, look into my eyes and tell them, did I truly harm you?" Tenny's breath hitched. Her fingers trembled. The entire village held its breath. But before she could answer, "Wait!" a small voice rang out through the square. The crowd turned to see Sua, one of Corey's youngest students, stepping forward. Her hands were clenched into fists, and her eyes shone with determination. "Tenny is lying," she declared. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Tenny's face paled. "No, She is lying because Obakana and Lekon forced her to say it," Sua shouted, pointing toward the wealthy merchant at the back of the crowd. All heads turned sharply toward Obakana, who had been watching the trial with quiet satisfaction until now. "The truth is uncovered." Sua stepped forward with confidence, her voice loud and clear. "I saw Lekon and his men whispering with Tenny before the festival. They told her she must do this, that she must say Corey harmed her." The villagers gasped again, this time in anger and shock. Sua turned to Tenny. "Tell them the truth, Tenny. You know what really happened." Tenny trembled as all eyes fell upon her. Tears welled in her eyes. Her lips quivered. She glanced at Corey, who still stood tall, unwavering. She turned toward Obakana, whose face was now dark with rage. She knew the risk of speaking out against him. But she also knew that staying silent would let an innocent man suffer. Finally, she dropped her head and whispered, "It is true." The crowd exploded into chaos. The fall of Obakana. Boba Ogunlai rose from his seat, his face thunderous. "You mean to tell me that you falsely accused a man of such a crime?" Tenny sobbed, nodding. "Lekon and his men told me I had to. And Obakana, he told them to spread the rumors." Gasps of shock and fury surged through the villagers. All eyes turned toward Obakana, whose smug expression had vanished. "Lies," he roared. "This is a trick." But the villagers were no longer fooled. "You tried to ruin a good man. You spread lies to keep our daughters uneducated. You must answer for this." Even the elders, who had once entertained doubts about Corey, now looked upon Connor with disgust. Boba Ogunlai stepped forward. "Obakana, you have dishonored this village." His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of judgment. "Your greed and fear made you blind, and you nearly cost us a great teacher. For this, you will be punished." He turned to his guards. "Take him and Lekon away. They will be judged for their crimes in the morning." The crowd roared in approval. Obakana tried to protest, but it was too late. The guards seized him, dragging him away as the villagers shouted their rage. Lekon and his men were also captured, their smugness now replaced with terror. A teacher vindicated. As the uproar settled, the villagers turned back to Corey. His hands were still bound, but now, his innocence was clear. Boba Ogunlai stepped forward, lifting his staff high. "Teacher Corey, you have been falsely accused. But truth, like the sun, cannot be hidden forever. You are free." With a swift motion, he cut the ropes from Corey's hands. A cheer erupted from the crowd. The young girls, who had once feared they had lost their teacher, rushed to him, their eyes shining with relief. Corey, though exhausted, smiled. Justice had won. And in the days to come, Ojon would never forget the lesson it had learned. The truth, no matter how hidden, always rises like the moon in the night sky. The victory of truth and wisdom. The morning sun rose over Ojon, casting golden rays over the village square where judgment was about to take place. The people had gathered once more, but this time, it was not for a trial against Teacher Corey, it was for the punishment of those who had tried to ruin him. Oba Connor and Lekan knelt before Baba Ogunlai, their wrists bound, their once proud faces now pale with fear. The elders stood in silence, their expressions cold. The air was thick with tension as the village chief struck his staff against the ground. "You spread lies," Baba Ogunlai declared, his voice steady but filled with authority. "You turned the people against an innocent man, all because of your greed and fear of change." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. "For this," the chief continued, "you will face the consequences." He turned first to Lekan, the troublemaker who had spread false rumors. "You will work in the fields for 5 years, without pay. You will toil from sunrise to sunset, and the food you grow will go to the village, not to your hands." The crowd nodded in approval. Lekan's face twisted in despair, but he said nothing. Then Baba Ogunlai turned to Oba Connor. The once powerful merchant bowed his head, knowing there was no escape. "Connor, your power in this village ends today." Gasps filled the air. "You will no longer trade freely in Ojon. From this day forward, your wealth belongs to the village. The land you own will be used to build a new school for the girls, and you will labor to help build it with your own hands." Oba Connor's face contorted in shock and rage. "No, Baba, please," he pleaded. "You cannot take everything from me." Baba Ogunlai's expression remained unmoved. "You tried to take the future from our daughters. Now you will give them back what you tried to steal." The villagers roared their approval, and the guards dragged Connor and Lekan away to begin their punishment. Justice had been served. The apology to Teacher Corey. After the punishment was carried out, Baba Ogunlai turned to Corey, his face solemn. "We wronged you, Teacher Corey," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "We allowed lies to cloud our judgment. We doubted your character when you had done nothing but serve us with honor." He bowed deeply, a rare sign of humility from a village chief. The elders followed suit. One by one, the villagers stepped forward to apologize, some with tears in their eyes. The girls, once frightened and confused, rushed to Corey, their faces filled with relief and admiration. "We never stopped believing in you, Teacher Corey. Please don't leave us." Corey looked at them, then at the people of Ojon, his heart full of emotion. For a long moment, he was silent. Then, with a small smile, he spoke. "I came here to teach, not to judge. I forgive you all." The relief in the crowd was palpable. But then Corey added, "However, if I am to stay, there must be one promise made." Baba Ogunlai nodded. "Name it, Teacher Corey." "It will be done." Corey's voice was firm. "From this day forward, education will be for every girl, not just the boys." A hush fell over the crowd. Then, Baba Ogunlai lifted his staff high. "It is decided," he declared. "From this day on, every girl in Ojon will receive an education." The crowd erupted into cheers. Mothers who had once feared for their daughters' futures now smiled through tears of joy. The village had changed, forever. The rise of a new generation. The days that followed were filled with hope. The first school for girls was built, with Oba Connor among those laying the stones. Corey resumed his teachings, this time, with the full support of the village. The young girls of Ojon flourished, their minds opened to new possibilities. They no longer dreamed only of marriage and motherhood, but of becoming leaders, healers, teachers, and storytellers. And at the heart of this change was Sua, the girl who had spoken the truth when no one else dared. She became a symbol of courage, inspiring the other girls to stand up for themselves, to question what was wrong, and to never let fear silence them. The legacy of Teacher Corey. Years passed, and Ojen became known throughout the land as the village that had changed. Girls who once would have been married off at a young age now pursued knowledge, leadership, and independence. Some became doctors, some became merchants, some even traveled to other villages to spread the importance of education. And at the center of it all was Teacher Corey. His lessons had never been just about books. They had been about truth, justice, and the power of standing up for what is right. His name became a legend, told around the fire as parents reminded their children of the man who had come to Ojen and changed the world in one day. And so, as the sun set over the village, laughter and learning filled the air. For Ojen had learned the most powerful lesson of all. Knowledge is the light that no darkness can overcome. The end.